In this video we have a catering fridge and there's quite a loud noise coming from the back. Right, so this is the back of the refrigerator. There is the motor and there is the fan blades. I'm just going to turn it on and just show you what the problem is. So there's more than one problem here. The fan is loose and wobbling. The second problem is that the motor has worn out, and if I touch the motor, it is extremely hot to touch. Before working on the fridge, make sure it is turned off and unplugged. Now on the front, there are 2 screws to remove this cover. Now this is not mandatory because you might be able to do this from the back without removing the cover. For the video, I am taking out the front cover to gain more access. On this unit, it's just 2 star screws. Right, since we've removed the front cover here, we can get access to where it is powered. There is a cable tie there and this covers. I'm just unscrewing this here to gain access to where the fan is plugged into. And this can just come off, slide off like that. Now using a side cutters, I'm just cutting through this cable tie which is holding these wires. I'll replace this afterwards. I've now released the wire for the condenser motor. Every fridge is different, but this particular one has the wires for the condenser motor fed directly here into where the bridge rectifier is. Now at the back there is a capacitor, so be very careful if you touch here with your fingers, because that capacitor will discharge through your fingers and you will get a shock. So even though you've unplugged the mains, there may still be charge here because of this capacitor, so be very careful with that. Now on this unit, I just have to lift this up and then I can get some space here. Now if you don't want to rewire that, you can just cut this completely and then just solder each one back. So if you wanted to, you could just leave these as is and then reconnect it directly to the live, neutral and earth of this fly lead here. So I'm going to show you both ways. So I'm first going to install the condenser motor and then I will come and wire it up. So now I can disconnect the fan. Right, so it's very dusty, so just best practice to just take a blower and blow out all the dust so that it is clean when you are working, and also it's better for the efficiency of the fridge. Now having a look at the new motor, you can see that there are these posts with these nuts and bolts on. So all I need to do is get underneath this plate and remove these nuts. Using a size 7 spanner, I'm just loosening these nuts. Right, if you're battling to get access to these screws, you can open the 2 nuts on this side and the 2 nuts on that side to remove this whole pedestal, this frame, and then it's easier to mount the fan. So I'm going to go ahead and remove these nuts on the side. I'm just spraying it with some lubrication. Right, now I can safely remove the motor assembly. Right, this is the unit in hand. There are the screws which I'll need to loosen, but I'm first going to remove the fan, and all I'm going to do is take a pair of long nose pliers and grab the shaft. Right, so I'm holding the shaft with long nose pliers. Be very careful not to bend the blades here. It will go out of balance. Taking my battery operated screwdriver, putting it on the reverse setting, and I'm opening this nut. Now on some fans you might find that the nut is reverse threaded. This one was normal threaded, meaning to loosen was anti-clockwise. So I'm removing that nut, and there I can release the blade from the motor assembly. So on this unit the fan was loose, but also inside here when I rotate this I can hear a grinding sound. That is why it was getting very hot. So I'm replacing this now. In this case I just need to loosen these 4 screws. This says 23 watts with 1300 RPM. Right over here I have a 25 watt unit, also 1300 RPM, and over here I've got a slightly smaller unit. This is a 16 watt and it is also 1300 RPM. Now I have contacted the manufacturer, and for this refrigerator it is actually the 16 watt. So make sure you replace it with what the manufacturer recommend, because sometimes when you're working on a refrigerator you might find that the person before you just put any size fan in. Maybe they put one that's too small, maybe they put one that's too big. So in this case, manufacturer specification for this model fridge is 16 watts, so I'm going ahead with the 16 watt unit. On the old unit it had 4 screws, while on the replacement it's got 2. So I'm just inserting this over here, but what I'm checking for is the alignment of this plate. So I'm going to put the original one on and just check where it's seated. So it was seated like that, and the motor did protrude about 10 millimeters. Why that's important is I need to know where to seat this. If I put it like that, that's going to be a problem because the fan is going to knock on the frame. If I put it over there, I got the same problem. So if I put it over here, it is also protruding just a little bit, which is fine. Most important is I don't want the fan blades to catch on the frame. Right, I just tighten these, but not very tight because these are only size 7. When it offers a bit of resistance, I just go at 1/16th turn and that is all. Now this one is already loose, so I'm just unscrewing this anti-clockwise in this case. Right, so I take the blades and place it on top of this white platform. Notice that this white platform has 4 fingers. So those fingers are now coming through to the other side. I then replace what is a washer with the screw and I tighten it. I'm holding on to the fan while I do this and I'm tightening this. And as I tighten it, this washer actually depresses a bit. Using my long nose pliers, I just clamp on the shaft just for a final tighten. Notice there's an arrow on the blade telling me the direction of rotation. This unit rotates anti-clockwise. It sucks air in over the condenser coils to cool them down. Notice that this is pushed all the way in and I'm just doing a clearance check and the fins, the blades do not scratch on the frame here. If it was scratching, I'd have to move this further out or possibly even drill more holes. Very important is that when the fan is mounted, that it does not scratch on the platform. In this case, there's these cross members. Now, if these cross members are protruding a little bit, this fan would scratch because it's not the exact same fan as the one that was here. The one that was here had a slightly longer shaft. So in your case, just check that before mounting it. Test it both in the extended position and in the recessed position. Now, if you're faced with a situation where the blade is too close to the frame or the platform, I'll show you what to do now. Now, one thing to be aware of is the old motor, as you can see, the shaft is very long. While look at this replacement motor, the shaft is short. So yes, maybe on the platform here, it might look the same, but look at that shaft. So that means that this motor should actually be moved forward by whatever the difference that is. So this is the only thing when you are not swapping for the exact same replacement part, you do have to make sure on these measurements. In my case, it was fine, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill new holes just to show you what to do if you're faced with this problem. So in this case, what one can do is drill holes a little bit further this way, which then moves the motor outwards. So I'm going to drill a hole there and there. All right, so this is 27. 27. All right, so I make sure that it is flush and that the holes are big enough and that there's enough support there for the motor body to sit on the platform. And don't over tighten these because they are only a size 7. You can put some thread locker here if you've got. To wire the motor, here is the wire. I have the blue, which is the neutral in this country. The brown is the live or the hot. And then there is the earth. Now, the way I'm going to wire it is I'm just going to take the wire that was coming from the power supply and I'm just going to expose some of the wires. Then I'm going to join it to the motor wires. You could wire the motor wires directly to the power supply here. I will also demonstrate the method to do that. Now, just a note, there is a capacitor at the back there. And that capacitor is very dangerous because it can remain charged for an extended period of time. I did short these 2 wires just to make sure that there's no shock hazard. The correct way to short this would actually be to take a resistor and short across these terminals to allow that capacitor to discharge through a resistor. But in my case, I don't have the resistor with me, so I just had to manually short it out with a screwdriver. Be very careful because this is a shock hazard, even when it's off. Right, so coming from the supply, I've just exposed some of the wire here. I'm just going to twist them. And then these are the wires that would go to the motor. Right, now I'm showing there is a warning there which says flammable, and because of that reason I'm not going to solder the wires. Right, I just need to join the green to the green, the brown to the brown, and the blue to the blue. Right, I'm first going to thread this nylon protective cover over the wire. Right, so there's the protective cover. These come in a variety of different sizes. You can use a terminal block and wire the 3 wires to the one side of the terminal block and then the other 3 wires to the other side. Just remember to put it in a little box if you are going to be using the terminal connector. In my case, I'm just using a 1.5mm ferrule. And there I crimped the one side and I just crimped that side as well. Now I just take some high quality insulation tape and just cover the ferrule with the insulation tape. Now do the same for the other 2 wires. If you don't have a crimper, you can use the blade of a pair of pliers. For example, you can also use it to squeeze the ferrule. So there I've used the pliers, but that's not the best practice. I'm just showing it just in case you don't have a pair of crimpers. Right, so I've crimped the live and the neutral, and I just need to crimp the other side. Now it's very important, before you crimp, you must twist these wires. If you want to, if your ferrule's a little bit big, you can actually double over like that, but make sure that when you do put the ferrule on, the wire goes into the ferrule, but the jacket stays outside. So I don't ever crimp onto the jacket, I only crimp onto the copper wire. Right, once you've finished your crimping, just check that it is tight, and now I can just cover them with protective insulation tape. Right, over here I've got different size heat shrink, and you might be wondering why I didn't use heat shrink. Now the reason is because of that. Now this compressor, we do not know the history of this, and it might be leaking, and if it's leaking and I take an open flame here, I can actually put myself in danger. So I'm just using the insulation tape as a protective covering here, and now all I do is I will then cover this one more time with some insulation tape. And there I've got the insulation tape, and now what I do is I just take my nylon protective sheath and I put it over it, and I just fasten on the one side, and there I have a nice protective sheath over my newly repaired wire. Right, now because this cable is a bit long, I don't want it to lie on the floor. Someone might be cleaning the floor. We don't ever want this cable in water. So what I'm going to do is just lift it off the floor and then cable tie it to the frame of this fridge. Right, so I've just put a cable tie here. I don't make it very tight. It's just enough to hold it in place. Now another option is to have wired this directly into these terminals. Just make sure that you've discharged that capacitor by using a resistor across the terminals. Now if you did want to wire it directly to these terminals, you would have followed the wire all the way to here. But now what you would need to do is open this up, possibly even get a new connector. So for example, the earth here, I would open it. I would open that entire thing, and now I would have to wire it into this connector over here. Now I would need to open this and then join the new earth wire, possibly even replacing it, and then I'd have to crimp it at the back. Then I'd have to do that for the neutral at the back and the live as well. Then I could connect this back onto the terminal. So you have 2 options here. You can either wire it directly onto the terminals as I've just shown now, or you could have cut the fly lead like I did and wired it directly to the motor, either using a terminal block, or you can use the ferrules like I did. Right, now we just need to close the unit. Okay, the things to look out for is that the fan is spinning without getting even close to the frame here or this bracket in both directions. And very important, as I'm showing, there's travel here, so check it in the most negative position as well as the most positive. You also don't want it to scratch on the condenser tubes. And this wire here cannot get on the side of the unit. It is cable tied down, and there it is also cable tied at the back. Now when we power up the fridge, there's the fan, and it is letting the air go over the condenser tubes, and there is no more grinding noise, clattering, or anything like that. Thanks for watching, and cheers.